Hey everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Outside Shore Music, home of MuseScore Café. So I am coming to you from a different location this week. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But yeah, I will be accompanying my wife's fifth grade choir later today for their graduation. Exactly what they call it, but anyhow, that is what I'm doing. So I'm using an improvised studio setting that you'll also see tomorrow. Um, I'm breaking up a bit. So tell me more about that, because this is like not my usual setup. I'm did some testing and things seem basically okay. But let me know how things are going and what's up. But maybe it's pretty well as well. Anyhow, um, so what I'm going to be talking about, music is drowning the voiceover. Okay, I get it. Okay. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the way I have my setup going here. I don't have control over the volume of the music. So because it's a different setup than my usual setup, so I'll just be aware of that. Don't talk over music. So anyhow, I am just a brief recap. I am coming to you from a different location. I'm coming from an elementary school where I will be accompanying a school performance later. My wife's the music teacher here, so that's what we'll be dealing with. And yeah, I can show you the thing later when we at the music masterclass tomorrow, because I will be using this setup. I've got my camera on a overhead. I'm able to do this stuff. Here we go. There's me, right? This is just my melodica, but eventually this will be a real keyboard. So very, very hacked together system, but it's working, and it's relevant to the topic. The topic today is customization, and in particular, my customization. So I'm not going to show you every possible way of customizing MuseScore. I'm going to show you some of the things that I've done, and in the process, you'll get to see what else is possible, right? So, so the first thing that I want to, so I've customized my actual workspace here. I guess that's the point to make as far as customization goes. So I want to talk first about workspaces. The MuseScore term workspace, not my physical workspace, but the MuseScore term of a workspace. If you look at the bottom of my screen, well, first of all, did I remember to share my screen? That's my question. Yes, I am remembering to share my screen. So good. You'll see at the bottom of the screen here is the thing that says workspace, right? And I am in a workspace called working. This is my usual working workspace. It's where I do most of my work. It is not what you would be seeing. You would be seeing a workspace that just says default if you haven't created your own. And I want to talk about workspaces first, because if you want to make customizations to palettes and toolbars, user interface sorts of things, you might want to do it in a custom workspace so you can have the original default workspace also available when necessary. Now, maybe you won't need that. I like to have the original default workspace always available for demonstration purposes, for teaching purposes, etc. So let me show you about the different workspaces and how you get to them. If I click the workspace button, you'll see that there are 4. And the default is the only one you would have normally. I have created 3 others. I've created one called Demo, I've created one called Presentation, and one called Working. Let me switch to the default workspace for a second. So the default workspace, you will notice when I switch to it, it's very similar. It just has fewer buttons. You may have noticed I had 4 voice buttons, all 4 voice buttons on my toolbar. I had a whole lot of palettes added, right? So I customized a few aspects of things. Mostly it was about those palettes. So the default workspace has not as much there to avoid overwhelming people. So if I want to create a new workspace, I'm going to create a new workspace right now by clicking the Create New Workspace button. Then I get this dialog here where I can create a workspace. And I'll go ahead and create one called Custom. You will notice there's these check boxes here. I'm going to recommend you just keep those checkboxes checked. But let me briefly talk about what it's actually doing. What these are doing is they're controlling, this is kind of hard to explain, they're controlling what gets saved as part of that workspace. So because palettes is checked here, that means any customizations I make to my palettes will only apply to this workspace. In theory, if I unchecked that palette box, then you would, if I added palettes, it would apply to all workspaces, or at least all workspaces that didn't have that box checked. So it's a little bit complicated, but in any case, normally you just want all those boxes checked. I will also say that they are working on an improved design for the whole workspace feature. So I'm going to go ahead and I do see your question, Michael. I will demonstrate that again in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and click the select button, which is the button that I'm going to click to basically say that yes, I want that custom workspace, and then it gets added to my list of available workspaces, and now I can click select again. So now I am in my custom workspace. So Michael, to answer your question, it's down here at the bottom, right next to concert pitch. You'll see workspace : and then the name of the workspace you're in. Click that, and there's what pops up, the dialog showing the different available workspaces. And you can also select one in here and delete it if you want, if you've decided you don't need this workspace anymore. So I'm going to use this custom workspace right now for further everything, well, not everything else I do today, but a bunch of the things I do today. I am going to show you one of my other workspaces, though, that I've created, and that is the presentation workspace. So can menus be repositioned? No, that is like fixed by, well, I would say it's fixed by the operating system. That's a slight lie, because this is a custom menu system that MuseScore has created, but it's designed to just mimic what the operating system does. So the menu system is not customizable. All right, so presentation workspace. Look what happens in my presentation workspace. My presentation workspace eliminates the node input toolbar. It still has to have this for some reason, like there's no way to customize and get rid of the upper toolbar. But that main node input toolbar is gone, as are all the side panels. So this is what I often use during the music masterclass. It gives me kind of a cleaner view of the score, and yet I'm still in score view, right? If you switch to publish view, you also get a cleaner view of the score, but a lot of things are disabled. You can't edit. Some of the shortcuts are disabled. It's useful, but it's not useful enough for me. So I use my presentation workspace. By the way, as far as the menu customization, I should say there's no supported way of doing it, and I can't really think of a reason why you would want to. But if you do want to customize your menus, you can save your workspace. Well, that workspace automatically is saved. There's a special file. I don't know where it gets saved to on Mac OS, some special hidden application folder. But if you edit that file, you will see the menus listed in there, and you can edit them. I just don't know that it will work well because it's not really tested. It's not something designed to be supported. All right, so my presentation workspace has a lot of things basically removed from it, and it's a cleaner workspace. Oh, and because it's cleaner, I no longer have that bottom status bar, so I can't actually access that button to get back to the workspace dialog. Luckily, I have also defined a keyboard shortcut. So I'm now going to segue to talking about custom keyboard shortcuts. I've defined a custom keyboard shortcut, Control-Alt-Shift-W, and that will pop up the workspaces dialog. And I will show you how to define custom shortcuts in a second. So now I can switch to my custom workspace and get my status bar back. All right, so let's talk now about the different things that are customizable. I just showed you a custom shortcut, and shortcuts are, I don't know, to my way of thinking, one of the most useful things that you might want to customize. I personally use shortcuts a lot, as you see in these demonstrations, because they're called shortcuts for a reason. They are usually much faster than moving the mouse around and clicking and so forth, if you can, remember them. So I like them to be memorable. The default shortcuts are quite useful, but there's a number of useful commands, like that one to switch between workspaces, that doesn't get a shortcut by default. And I guess it's kind of good that not every command has a default shortcut, because not every command is equally useful to everyone. Some people would never use that command, and therefore they might want to use Control-Alt-Shift-W for some other command. And so if it's taken by the workspace command, it's not available for other commands, and then you have to find another alternative or clear the other shortcut. So the shortcuts that are predefined are ones that are thought to be useful to the largest group of people, but there's all sorts of other ones that I personally think are useful. So I'm going to show you some of those. So how do we get to shortcut definition? You're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and on Mac OS, Preferences is not in the Edit menu, it's in the Application menu or the Apple menu, some other special place wherever preferences usually go on Mac OS. So under Edit Preferences, you'll see Shortcuts. Now, here at this point, I get to tell if I didn't see who everyone was checking in, but I know we have quite a few blind users of MuseScore, and the shortcut customization facility has for the last year and a half not been accessible, which is a real drag because shortcuts are that much more useful for a blind user. And so ever since MuseScore 4 came out, the shortcut definition dialog has been not accessible, meaning meaning basically the tab key won't move through the button, the screen reader doesn't read properly. For 4.3.1, which will be coming out any day now, they just released a release candidate of it just a few hours ago. So I would expect sometime in the next few days, 4.3.1 will come out, and it just fixes a couple bugs in 4.3. There's actually not any major bugs in 4.3. There were no huge showstopper issues, some annoying things here and there, but in any case, every reported regression, every recorded bug new in 4.3 is fixed now. So, but there's no new features. So unroll repeats, if that's what you're asking about. No, someone would have to design and build that feature. But 4.3.1 is just going to fix any bugs that 4.3 introduced, which again, there weren't many, they weren't very big, but they are all now fixed. But in addition, they finally have the shortcut definition dialog accessible to blind users, so you can access that dialog by keyboard. It was sort of ironic that the dialog for defining keyboard shortcuts was not actually accessible using keyboard. Really kind of a bad state of affairs, but that is now going to be fixed for 4.3.1. And yes, I know a year ago there used to be an unroll tool. What I'm saying is 4.3.1 fixes all regressions introduced in 4.3. It doesn't reintroduce features that have been not present for a year, doesn't introduce any new features beyond that. It just fixes regressions introduced in 4.3 plus that accessibility thing. That's it. So let's talk about how we're going to define a shortcut. I'm going to just scroll here, and you see that there's tons of commands here, and some of them have default shortcuts, and some of them don't. A lot of these commands don't have shortcuts by default. Let's say that you use explode a lot. So you can select explode here, and you can search for things in here. Like if I want to look for implode also, I can type implode into the search box, and then you'll see the implode command. And that I can select it, or I can just actually search for plode, and that will show them both to me. That's kind of useful, because now I can define both explode and implode. If I use these a lot, I can select explode, then click the define button, and now I get a shortcut. I get this dialog box. And now you'll see that my tab key is correctly except my window isn't showing the keyboard shortcuts the way it should. That somehow got messed up a little bit. But you'll see Tab is flipping back and forth between the Save button and the field where you enter the new shortcut. So if I want Explode to be, say, Control-Alt-Shift-E. Control-Alt-Shift, by the way, is a really useful sequence for custom shortcuts because MuseScore doesn't define anything Control-Alt-Shift by default. I think literally nothing, maybe there's one or two, but most Control-Alt-Shift plus some letter are all available. So if I type Control-Alt-Shift-E, it's available unless I've done it. Yeah, so Control-Alt-Shift-E, I just pressed, and now there it shows up under New Shortcut, and then I can press Tab to get over to the Save button, or just click the Save button. I'm going to do it by keyboard just to show that it works. I'm going to hit Enter, and now you'll see Control-Alt-Shift-E is now my Explode shortcut. I can then click Implode, define Control-Alt-Shift-I, and great, now that's a shortcut. So the question about the printout of the shortcuts, if you got that like from the manual, if you got that from the MuseScore 4 handbook or the version, the special formatted version that I've created and made available on my website here, none of the shortcuts are changing since MuseScore 4 came out. This is all about customizing your own, but you are certainly welcome to redefine any of the existing ones. So if you don't like the fact that say node input mode is N, you want it to be, I don't know, I for input instead, or Shift I or something else like that, you can redefine an existing shortcut. So I'll show you that in a moment. So very little in MuseScore is hardwired as far as those shortcuts go. There are a few things that are, like while you're entering lyrics, I think space to move to the next syllable, that one might be a hardwired. There's a couple things about lyric entry. Let me see about, if I just type space here. Yeah, go to next word, space. Okay, I guess that one is customizable. But there are definitely a few things within the editing of text basically that are hardwired, but almost everything else is this. But yeah, unroll repeat just is not available. It just has not been implemented for MuseScore 4. MuseScore 4 has an entirely rewritten user interface compared to MuseScore 3. So and other things about how it handles processes internally, how it opens files internally. So that command would just have to be rewritten, and no one has yet undertaken that task. For MuseScore 4.4, it's going to be using Qt6 under the hood. It's a programming thing, and this might make that task a little easier, but still no one has dealt with that yet. But it's conceivable 4.4 would bring back that command if someone decides to work on it. So, yes, you can define shortcuts here. But, oh yes, and some of these older commands might be in the shortcut list, but they just won't do anything if you try to define a shortcut for them. If you see some things in the shortcut list are just there as placeholders for functionality yet to be added. But most things are real. So let's say I want to define, like configure workspace, you see, is where I have it defined as Control-Alt-Shift-W. If I try to take the select workspace command and try to define a shortcut for that and Control-Alt-Shift-W, I don't even know what that one does, to be honest, you'll notice it tells me, hey, that shortcut is already defined, is already assigned to configure workspace. It won't let me use an existing shortcut. It'll tell me what previous command already has that, and then I can go redefine that one if I want. But in any case, the shortcut definition will not let you define the same shortcut for two different commands, unless they're two different commands that don't overlap with each other. Like there's some commands that are only available like during while entering text. Other commands that are only available during node input. And you can actually use the same shortcut for two different things in that case. Like the letter A will enter a letter A into text, but it enters a note in node input mode, right? So the same key can do different things depending on what mode you're in, and the shortcut dialog to some extent can handle that. Okay, so that's how you define shortcuts. And then you can also clear them, right? If I click Configure Workspace here and click the Reset to Default button, that will reset it to the default, which is nothing. Or you can press Clear, which will clear it. So if I click Reset to Default on Configure Workspace, it clears it because that is the default. But if I take one that I have customized, like let's say I change go to next word, so instead of space, I don't even know if this is really going to work, I change it to right. Now if that doesn't work, I have to pick something. Okay, right parentheses is my go to next word command now, and save it. So now I will see the go to next word. Oh, it no longer shows up in that space in that search. So go to next word is right parentheses. If I select that and press clear, it gets cleared. But if I click it and say reset to default, it goes back to space like it has always been. So that's the difference between clear. Clears it, reset to default, sets it to whatever the default is, whether it was nothing or something. So, do I have all my shortcuts back the way I wanted them? I think so. So I'm just going to hit OK. Oh, interesting. There's a motion sensor in this room. Let me get my lights back on. Got to walk around the room waving my hands a little bit to get the lights to come back on. All right, so let me go back to the shortcut definition then, and now let's talk about what some of my actual favorite shortcuts actually are. You don't even have to see the list, but I'll show it to you. One of them is width. So there's a zoom command, Control-0, that zooms your score to the to life size. It makes it 100%, and then there's Control- to zoom out, Control+ to zoom in, but there's a command, zoom to page width, that doesn't have a default shortcut, but I love this command, so I've defined my own shortcut. It's Control \. So what you'll see now is if I press Control-0 right now, it makes the score life size, same size as a piece of paper. If I press Control-, it starts getting smaller and smaller. Control+, actually Control equals, because they're the same key. Control equals zooms in. If I press Control \, it makes it exactly the width of the screen. And what's cool about that is it keeps it that way. So even if I make the screen smaller, it correctly reduces the size of the score to fit the available space. So zoom to page width, I love it. It works great for me, but it's not. But sometimes I zoom in, sometimes I zoom out, and then I want to get back to that. So I have a shortcut for it, Control \. So that is one of the commands that I find very useful. The other one that I've mentioned before, and let me switch to another window for a second so I can play with my score without confusing myself. Give me a moment here. I'm going to create a score. First of all, I'm going to talk about templates next. But notice I've got all these different templates here, and I've created them for different reasons, but let me go ahead and I'll use the modified stave notation. I was talking about accessibility. Modified stave notation is basically large print scores, so it's a template that I created for large print scores, and so that's what this is. So let's talk about what my other most favorite custom shortcut that I've defined. I'm going to add a dynamic marking right now. I will add a mezzo piano. Let's say that I want to add another mezzo piano over here. Yes, I can keep coming over to the palette and clicking mezzo piano, or you can rely on the fact that MuseScore can remember what the the most recently used palette item was. And there is a command to apply current palette item. In that shortcut definition dialog, you'll see one of the commands is apply current palette item. And so I have defined that shortcut to be backslash without, no control backslash, just backslash. So if I select a S and press backslash, boom, there's my MP again. So this is great if there's a particular, like, yeah, it would be lovely to be able to enter all the dynamics with shortcuts, and someday, no doubt, that'll be possible. So, maybe MP isn't such a great example for this, but there's other things like, say, tremolo. Let's say that I've got some notes in here, and let me get some a little more volume. If I enter a tremolo symbol on this note, but then I'm like, yeah, but I also want it on this backslash. I also want it on this note, backslash. So I can easily keep applying the same marking over and over again, which is really useful for markings that want to be applied to a lot of different places in a score. So articulations, the most common ones like staccato and marcato and sforzato, all the common articulations have their own default shortcuts, but for the ones that don't, like, say, bow symbols, say you want to add a bunch of down bow symbols to your score, well, add one, and then you can keep using that apply current palette item command. Actually, down bow, I think you can define a shortcut for if you want. So under my shortcuts, if I now search for apply, you'll see there's apply current palette item I have defined as slash. And I think the bow commands, yes, there is the ability to define a shortcut for bow markings specifically. So if you use those a lot also. So what I find is I can't necessarily remember a whole ton of shortcuts, but the things that I use daily, I am going to remember. And so that's what I want to do is, there's a lot of shortcuts I don't remember because I don't use them, but the things that I do a lot, I want to use. And so those I use so often that I'm going to remember. By the way, if you're hearing a lot of background noise, remember I am in an elementary school. I'm in a classroom that is not being used, but surrounded by other classrooms that very much are. And today is the last day of school for the 5th grade and the kindergarten, which is why I'm playing for performance. So people are very rowdy. So apologize if you're hearing a lot of distractions here. So yes, by all means, you're not required to use shortcuts, but they really can save a lot of time. And if you choose ones that are easy to remember, like knowing that Control-Alt-Shift plus a letter is going to do that thing. What's my workspace command? Control-Alt-Shift-W. What's my export command? Control-Alt-Shift-E. What's my implode command? Control-Alt-Shift right? I mean, if you set it up well, these aren't so hard to remember. Now, it did come up about the default shortcuts and that they're not hardwired. You can redefine them. I typically don't. Okay, I'm glad you're not hearing any other noises because I can and I have headphones on. So I personally almost never redefine any of the predefined shortcuts, for the simple reason that as someone who wants to be teaching people MuseScore, I need to know what the defaults are. So I can be talking about things in terms of the default shortcuts and not like say, oh, I wish it was this thing instead, so I'm going to change it to this other thing, and then have to remember two shortcuts, mine and the default one. So I typically don't change the default shortcuts. I live with them even if I don't like them. However, and this is going to be true for almost everyone's system, I shouldn't say almost everyone, but it's sort of unavoidable. Every keyboard, every operating system is a little different in their layout. I mean, all US QWERTY Microsoft Surface keyboards are identical. All Norwegian Mac OS keyboards are identical, etc. But they're very different from each other in terms of their layout. So what you'll find is just little differences like, oh, gee, I don't have this key on my keyboard, or I have to press shift to get to that key on this keyboard, but then that makes this other shortcut not work so well. So there's some shortcuts that you might find just simply don't work on your system because of the keyboard layout makes it not work. So I have a couple of those, and so I have redefined those. And this is another really useful use for this customization facility. One of them for me is Alt up and Alt down. If I press a note here and press Alt down, nothing happens because, let me, well, that's weird. That's totally not the right clef. I don't know what that's about, something weird in my template, because that is a low C I'm hearing, but it looks like a treble clef. So obviously I set up something really bizarre in this template. But in any case, Alt up and down are supposed to be the shortcut to move between staves. Unfortunately, on my system, Alt plus Alt up and down are reserved keys for the operating system. It has to do with flipping between windows or something. Actually, I'm surprised it's not doing anything because it used to like resize the window. I think maybe only if my window is not full screen it does something. That's weird. It's not doing anything. I wonder if that's actually changed. I should check that out. In fact, I'm going to do that in a second. So in any case, Alt up and down should be moving between staves, moving the focus between staves, or in node input mode, same thing, should be moving the focus between staves. Because that hasn't worked on my keyboard, I've redefined those to be left square bracket and right square bracket. So left square bracket moves down, right square bracket moves up. I am a little curious now if that has fixed itself in my operating system, if that's like no longer a thing. So I'm going to type left bracket, and so that's select note rest below. I'm going to click that guy and reset it to the default of Alt down, and see, does Alt down work now? Oh my gosh, it works now. I can use Alt down now. Wow. That must have been a recent Chrome OS thing where they've no longer reserving that thing. I'll have to look into that a little bit more, but that makes me kind of happy that I think I will be able to use Alt up and Alt down now and not have to use the left and right bracket. Of course, I'll have to retrain myself to remember that, but that's kind of cool. I'm happy about that. All right, so that's the stuff I wanted to tell you about shortcuts. Are there other shortcuts that I've defined? Well, yes, quite a few that are specific to my workflow. So for instance, I create worksheets a lot, educational worksheets, and so I'm often adding frames. So I've defined Control-Alt-Shift, right? That's my jam. Control-Alt-Shift-H for a horizontal frame, Control-Alt-Shift-V for a vertical frame, Control-Alt-Shift-T for a text frame. Also, I use section breaks a lot between the examples. So I've defined, like, you know how Enter is a system break, Control Enter is a page break. I've defined Control Alt Enter to be a section break. And I don't remember why I chose that, because Alt is like one of those ones that we try not to use a whole lot. I could have made it be Control Alt Shift Enter, I just didn't. So so those are commands that I have defined shortcuts for because I personally use them often. But, you know, most people probably don't use those as often, so it's just as well there's not default shortcuts for them, but that's how you can define them. Other ones that I keep defining and every once in a while think I might even remember them are the shortcuts for breaking and joining beams. So if I enter myself some eighth notes, the shortcuts for breaking and joining beams I have defined to be Control plus comma, period, and /. And here is where those of you saying you can't remember shortcuts, yeah, I don't break and join beams often enough to remember these. But those comma, period, and / are adjacent to each other on my keyboard. So with Control, they do something, they do this. So Control, comma, I guess doesn't break it. Control, period, breaks the beam. Control / makes no beam. Control, comma, joins again. So that's the thing. Join is the comma, and period is break, and / is no beam. I picked those because those were three adjacent keys on my keyboard that felt like they might work for me. And with control, they were all available. So those are some of the ones that I have defined personally. Again, you get to choose for yourself. What are you constantly going to the menu for? And if it's in the menu, there's a shortcut for it. That is almost guaranteed. If it's in the menu, you can define a shortcut for it. I wish it were the case that if it were in the palette, you could define a shortcut for it, but unfortunately that's just not true. Only a few palette items have the ability to define shortcuts. Eventually, probably they all will, but that's a feature we've all wanted for years and just isn't there yet. All right, so that's some stuff about shortcuts. The next thing I wanted to talk about was templates. So I mentioned that this template, hey look, the bass clef is added correctly on the other system. It's just wrong on this system. I wonder what that's about. I'll still blame my template, but it's probably a bug somewhere. Templates are really useful if you are often defining the same type of score. So, for instance, if you're often writing scores for a particular ensemble that you maybe work with, I'll go to create a new score here. If you are, say, often writing for a, I don't know, flute trio, let's say. As far as a shortcut list, I can tell you where to get them. Go to the course. They are in the MuseScore 4 course. You will find in one of the introductory lessons within Mastering MuseScore 4, I made a nice printable table. It's designed to be front and back of a sheet of paper, and it lists all the shortcuts other than a couple really esoteric ones, nicely organized into categories. So that's where that is. But also, if you go to the MuseScore 4 handbook, if you go into the help menu in MuseScore, help, handbook, you'll also find a table there. It's not nicely printable, but there is a table that's useful. But within the course, I produced a really nicely formatted version. All right, so let's say I want to create a flute trio, and I know I'm going to want a lot of them. Well, I can go 1 flute, 2 flutes, 3 flutes, and now I have a flute trio. But maybe your flute trio, maybe that's all there is to it. Just that, you just have 3 flutes, and that's good enough. But maybe you've also decided that for various reasons you want the font size to be a little bigger. These are, they don't need huge print, but they need slightly bigger print. Well, I can go to Format, Page Settings, and just turn up the page size just slightly. I'll make it 1.8 millimeter. Someone else has a nice shortcut list PDF. That's great too. I know I've seen PDFs of like a picture of a keyboard with the keys labeled by what commands they are. So it's sort of the other way around. If you're looking at a key, it tells you what the command is, whereas my table is, if you know the command, it'll tell you the shortcut. But in any case, yeah, I'm sure there's other of these tables floating around. So, and also, of course, that table that I created is your free gift when you sign up for my newsletter. So when you signed up for my newsletter, which I assume most of you did, then you should have already received my shortcut table. If not, sign up for my newsletter now. You'll get it. I'll make my print just slightly larger, and it presumably did that. I didn't actually pay attention. Did it make it a little bigger? I guess it did. So now I have a score set up the way I want. Maybe you customize some other style settings or whatever. When you have your score set up the way you want, give it a name. Call it Flute Trio here. I like to change the name in the score itself and also in the project properties. Call it Flute Trio. I think it's the name in the score itself that becomes the template name. But in any case, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this score. So Control S is the shortcut for save in every program ever, Command S on Mac. Instead of saving to my scores folder, I'm going to go up a level to MuseScore 4. And now, it's having to page in. I'm using Google Drive, so a lot of my folders are not actual local to my computer. It's having to load this from Google Drive, and the school internet here is unfortunately super slow. I'm glad it's not causing more problems than it is, but it is a very slow internet. In any case, you will find when it decides to, there is a templates folder. So there's score folder under MuseScore for it, and within the templates folder is all the templates I've already created. I'll create this one now and call it Flute Trio and save it to this folder. And now that I've done that, I can then create flute trios just by selecting that template when I create a score. Now, it didn't take me that long to create that score, so maybe that doesn't save you a lot of trouble. But if you're talking about selecting like 7 or 8 different instruments and a whole bunch of different style settings, etc., it's going to save you some work. So now, if I press Control-N to create a new score, when it comes up, I will be able to select the template that I just created, and I'll get myself a new, slightly larger than default flute trio. So give me a moment here. I will say create from template, and down at the bottom of the list on the left column is my templates, and now you'll see flute trio is one of the choices. So I can select that, come in here to the next screen, give it a better name like another trio, and then say done, and I will now have my score set up as a flute trio. It's got my 3 flutes, it's got my slightly larger page size, staff size, and it's got my new title. So templates, if you write for the same type of ensemble often, that's a very useful thing. In my case, I don't write for the same type of ensemble often, but as you saw, I did have certain ones like that large print modified stave notation, which for whatever reason doesn't seem to work correctly, so I'll look into that later as well. In fact, I'm going to write a little, hey, I've got sticky notes. Cool. They're not my sticky notes, they're whoever normally teaches in this classroom, but I'm going to write note to myself to look into the MSN template and look into Alt plus up down. All right, so those are templates, and they're quite useful. They basically just create an empty score for you, set up the way some other scores. So again, it's all about writing multiple scores for the same type of ensemble or with the same style settings. So that's templates. With the new name, does the old flute trio template? Yeah. So that template is now out of the picture. When I saved it to my templates folder, it is there and never will be touched again unless I choose to open that template normally and edit it. But normally you wouldn't need to. So now, if I press Control-S to save this thing, it's going to ask me, hey, where do you want to save it? And it's going to default to your scores folder. So it's no different from any other score at this point. Its connection to the template that it came from is severed, exactly like every other score you've ever created is severed from its template. So if you create a score using one of the predefined choral templates or the predefined orchestra template, it doesn't edit the template, it just gives you a new score based on that template. Same with custom templates. It's no different at all for custom templates. It's a new score based on that template, but no longer connected to that template in any way. So yeah, now you can save it and save it to your scores folder, save it to whatever other subfolder you prefer to save to. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about after templates is so someone tell Joanne just maybe try refresh her screen, F5, and if not, you leave and come back. Those are always the things. So if someone would put that in the chat, that would be lovely. What I want to talk about next are toolbars. There's not a whole ton to talk about, but you may remember that I had in my working workspace not just 2 voice buttons, I had all 4 voice buttons. Now, in fact, I use the shortcuts for that, Control Alt 1, Control Alt 2, Control Alt 3, Control Alt 4. So I almost never click those buttons except for demonstration purposes. But if I click the gear icon, you'll see all these commands here. Some of them have an open eye icon, some of them have a closed eye icon. The closed eye icons are the ones that don't show up by default. So for instance, if you look at my durations, you'll see it goes up to whole note, but doesn't have a double whole note. Well, I've been doing a lot of Renaissance music, so I want my double whole note there. So I'll open the eye for that, and now I got a double whole note on my toolbar. Similarly, if I want double dots, which I don't, they are evil. That's an exaggeration, but they are overused. So if you want to have double dots, you can make those show up. And I'm keep scrolling down to where the voice buttons are. There's a cross staff beam button, which again I know the shortcut for Control Shift up and down. But if you want to show it on the toolbar, open its eye, and then there it is. And then here's my voice 3 and my voice 4 buttons. And if you don't like where that cross staff beam button is, I think you can drag it. Can you? No, you can select it and then use the up and down arrows to move that cross staff beam button. So instead of being before the triplet, I can move it down, and now it's after the triplet, if you like that better, right? So you can also, if you say, you know what, I'm never going to use double flats, you think double flats are evil, you could remove that. Or I'm probably never going to use the 64th note. I could totally remove that and save a little space, right? So you can, and then the shortcut will still work, right? If you know 4, 5, 6, like I can't offhand remember what 64th note is, but I know 4, 5, 6 is 8th quarter half, therefore 3 is 16th, 2 is 32nd, 1 must be 64th note. If I ever need a 64th note, I can type 1 and get it. So there you go. So that's how you can customize this toolbar using the gear icon. And you can also say, you know what, I don't want to see it at all. Remember my presentation workspace didn't have that toolbar at all. I can go to the View menu, View Toolbars, and I can just turn it off and say, bye-bye Node Input Toolbar, and that toolbar is gone. There is no way to make this main toolbar go away. I think that's a drag. And there should be more customization there, and the design team knows it. They just aren't dealing with it yet. But you can also make the status bar go away. My presentation workspace did that also, right? I had gotten rid of all of these controls at the bottom just to save some space, and so you can make that go away also in View Toolbars, and you can make the status bar go away, or you can bring the Node Input Toolbar back. So that's what you can do with toolbars. Finally, as far as the things that I knew I wanted to talk about here is the palettes. So the default set of palettes is this set of palettes that I think everyone is likely to want to use at some point. But there's all sorts of palettes that MuseScore has that are not there by default, like Grace Notes. There's no Grace Notes palette here by default, right? And there's all sorts of others. By the way, about the palettes and these other side panels here, this is also remembered with your workspace. So that is why I had closed each of those. I had, if in the ... menu for the palettes, you can say close it, and it goes away. And then you can come into the View menu and reopen it, and now it's back, right? And then you can also change their order by dragging them around and all sorts of customizations of that I never mess with. But yeah, it's also a little glitchy on my system. It's part of my Chromebook system weirdness. So I'm going to actually close that palette again, this time using the shortcut F9, and then reopen it. And when I try to reopen it, notice that it's not in the same order it was before, and that kind of bothers me. I'm used to having the palettes tab to the left. So you can go to View, Restore the default layout, and I think, yeah, it resets these side panels back the way they started. If you've been messing with them and you just want to get it back the way it was, View, Restore the default layout will fix things like that. So anyhow, these are the default palettes, but maybe there's additional palettes you want also. Oh man. I don't know how dark I look right now, but I'm just gonna get my light back on. When I walked away, could you hear the crowd noise in the hall outside? Anyhow, if I click the Add Palettes button, you'll see all these other palettes that come with MuseScore. They're just not pre-installed. Well, for my working workspace, I've basically added them all. I've basically added all of them. There's only a couple I didn't add. One is accordion because I'd never write for accordion, and I don't even know what those other symbols are. Same with bagpipe. So I didn't add the accordion and bagpipe embellishments palettes, but I think I've added everything else to my my special working workspace. And yes, you're right. You can deliberately take that palettes and undock it, and now it's separated and you can dock it somewhere else or make it floating like this. And some people like that because it does let you position it closer to the score, and I know there's people who like that. But that's how you probably got yourself in trouble, Dave, with you probably accidentally dragged it off screen, and that's why you probably didn't have palettes for a while. In any case, I don't find it useful, so I'm putting them back where they were. So I can add palettes here. So if I decide I want my Grace Notes palette, boom, now I've got my Grace Notes palette. If I also want, say, oh, the Noteheads palette, that's another one I didn't add because everything on the Noteheads palette is also in the Properties panel. So yes, I'm about to show that, DA. So let's say I want the note heads, and I want the harp, and I want the guitar, and I want the fingerings, and beam properties, another one I don't need because it's on the properties panel. So some of the things on these palettes used to only be in palettes for MuseScore 3, but now they're in the properties panel for MuseScore 4. So the old palettes are there for people who don't want to learn to use the properties panel, but there's no reason to add them because they're duplicated in properties. So can you reorder them? Frank, I'm going to come to your question in a second. Can you reorder them? Yes, just by drag and drop. So the default ordering is designed to be kind of logical. Clef's key signature, time signature first, because that's the first things in your score, and they're also things that typically once you've added you don't mess with again. I mean, obviously if your score changes time signature or key many times, you'll need to come to them, but these are like things that you do when you first set up your score. Same with tempo. Then the other things further on in the list are things that you typically use throughout the score, and they're kind of grouped together. So in my version of doing this, I try to keep to that level of organization, again, with the idea that I kind of want to have, I don't want to deviate too far from the defaults because I don't want to have to learn where things are for me differently than where things are for everyone else, because I'm trying to teach MuseScore. I want where things are for me to look kind of like where they are for everyone else. So I put my fingering palette near my text palette, and so I just drag it down to where text is. Guitar goes by keyboard. Harp also goes by keyboard, right? So these are the instrument-specific palettes. Maybe I'll put it between keyboard and guitar. Grace notes are kind of notes, and they get added along with my pitch palette, which has a few things that also relate to notes, like the octave signs, right? So you can drag things, and you can also customize the contents of the thing. And so the idea of putting palettes in alphabetical order, certainly you can drag them into alphabetical order yourself. There's two reasons why it's not done by default. One is it won't translate at all, right? Because every language is going to have a different alphabetical order. But also, it is so ridiculously illogical to have clefs and time signatures at opposite ends of your palette list when they are logically so connected. And it actually ends up being a lot. And it also requires you to know the name of the palette rather than its function. So that there's a reason why things aren't done that way by default, but certainly if you prefer to have them alphabetically, you can just drag them that way yourself. Or you can open your workspace file. When you create your custom workspace, that gets saved to an XML file in some special magic hidden folder on your computer. If you edit that XML file, you can rearrange the the list however you want that way as well. So that would work. But could there be a command to do it? Yeah, someone could probably write one. But yeah, there's reasons why most user interface design things say don't use alphabetical order, except for lists of equal elements, like a list of all countries in the world or all fonts in the world. Those will be alphabetized, but things that have logical distinctions between them should, like according to user interface standards, not be alphabetized, and that's kind of why. Okay, so coming back to Frank's question about the page width command, pushing the view of the score to top left corner, I guess I'd have to see a picture of what you're talking about. But there are two different settings you might want to know about. So here's another customization. If I go to Edit, Preferences, Canvas, these are a couple other customizations worth knowing about. So there's, first of all these customizations here, light mode, dark mode. I'm not a big dark mode fan, but I know a lot of people are, so by all means, you can switch to dark mode. There's this high contrast mode that adds like borders around all the elements, which can work for people with low vision. There's also the ability to choose accent color, what color is used to highlight elements within, like which palette is selected and so forth. You can choose your font face, etc. All that's under appearance. But under canvas, there's two options, Frank, you might want to look into. Well, one is the scroll pages horizontal or vertically. So if you've got multiple pages in your score, do they show left to right like that, or do they stack this way? And so that could be relevant. The other one is the limit scroll area to page borders. If you have that option checked, like I do, then it won't let you drag your canvas away. Like I can't like drag the canvas so that it's all off to the side and there's a bunch of blank space. With that option off, you can. And there's actually valid reasons why sometimes you might want to. So chances are whatever you're talking about might relate to that. So there you go. So also, as far as the palettes go, you can also, if you notice like there's these things under more, like if you use that 22 a lot, you can just drag it into the main part of the palette so that it's not hidden behind more. Or if you're like, you know what, I am never going to use this palette at all, or at least I'm never going to use the 15s, you can delete them. You can click that and press delete, or click the delete icon here, right? So you can get rid of things, and as you're getting rid of them, they just go there under more. They're still there. So if you think it's distracting to see them, then you can make things go away. You can also add things to your palette. Like if you tend to use a particular phrase a lot, like play this like you mean it, and say that's a piece of text you use a lot. Well, you can come over to the text palette, you can Control Shift drag that to your text palette. And if you do that, it should let you add it. What we've discovered recently is a bug. We've always known that sometimes you try to do that and it just doesn't work. Like it's not working now. It's because of using more. Once you've used that more section of the palette, it makes it uncustomizable for some reason. So the secret is close that palette again, F9, press F9 again to reopen it, and now I will be able to Control Shift drag my custom text into the palette, play this like you mean it, and now there it is in the palette, right? So you can also move things between palettes. Like one thing you could totally do is decide, like for instance, that pitch palette. There's only those two items on it that are really useful. Okay, also that if you do Renaissance music, the ambitus symbol. Well, you could totally just move those to other palettes and then get rid of them. Like if you decide that that octave stuff is maybe you want it in the layout palette or something, you can just drag them into the layout palette and so forth. And Dave, was it Dave that mentioned this? I totally agree. The bar lines palette as well as repeats, I think belong up at the top. In my custom workspace, that is one of the few changes I made to the default order. I find bar lines and repeats make more sense up towards the top. So that's where I put them. Did I put layout up there also? I do keep fiddling with it periodically, and I've got different customizations on different systems as well. So yeah, Frank, that picture is exactly what happens if you don't have the that limit to page border set. But on the other hand, if that ever happens, then just press the home button. The home button, or FN left, if you don't have a physical home button, FN left will always position a score. Like right now, I'm zoomed in, and you can't see the top left-hand corner, but if I press home, FN left, it positions it with that page where you expect it. So yeah, you can add elements to the palette from your score. You can move things between palettes. You can drag the palettes around to rearrange them. You can delete palettes. You can delete elements from palettes. A lot of customization possible within your palettes, and that's definitely a useful thing. So I've covered a whole lot of things about my customizations. I'm going to go back to my workspace for a second before I bid you all adieu, and just take a look at some of the things that I've done in here so you can see. So yes, I have put brackets and bar lines up at the top. Wait a minute, I didn't put repeats up there? Repeats are still down here. I think I might have done that on my other system, and it's not on this system. I created my own custom palette called favorites, where some people like to do this, just have one palette with all your favorite symbols so they're not scattered among lots of different palettes, right? I haven't done that. I've created the space for it. I've created the space for it, but I haven't actually put anything on it. And then, so Sora's question, if you change the palette on one piece, will it stay for all pieces? It's connected to the workspace. It is not connected to a piece. So one thing about customization, make sure you only have one MuseScore window open when you do your customizations. Otherwise, the two different windows might have different customizations and they will clobber each other. So close MuseScore completely before doing a lot of customization. I should have said this up front. Close MuseScore completely before you do a lot of customization. Open it up, have only one window going, do all your customizations in there, and then either close it or change workspaces. Either of those will have the effect of saving that workspace. But now that workspace is that workspace, and it is there to be used in any score. Workspaces are not associated with scores. They are just saved as part of MuseScore. So that's what I had to talk about here. Oops, that's not the window I want. It's a nice window, but I want the actual MuseScore window here. And here we go. Are you going to play my theme music, or are you going to not? Okay, maybe it's not. Pretend we're hearing the music. So thanks everyone for being here, and thanks for the questions and comments that came in here, and thanks for the sharing that custom works shortcut document. I'll be interested to check that out myself. And by all means, think about your own your own workflow and what customizations will make sense to you, and see how you can make your own life easier through customization. Thanks, everyone. And again, sorry we're not hearing music right now. I'm not sure why, but that's the way it is. Catch you next time. Goodbye.